archaeologists uncovered lost faces, sealed vaults, and eerie remains no one can explain. This will haunt your mind. In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius turned the vibrant Roman city of Pompeii into a frozen snapshot of disaster. For centuries, the ruins lay silent beneath layers of ash, until archaeologists began carefully uncovering what was left behind. Among the most heartbreaking discoveries was the plaster cast of two small figures lying side by side, mouths open, arms stiffened, caught in the instant a pyroclastic surge swallowed them. They weren't sculptures or props. They were real people whose final moments had been preserved with eerie clarity by the volcanic ash that buried the city in minutes. These casts weren't just scientific finds. They were a direct, emotional bridge to a disaster that happened nearly 2,000 years ago. Unlike statues made to look sad, these figures were sad. Their expressions, captured mid-scream, tell a story no textbook could. Archaeologists found them near the remains of a house, not far from food stores and cooking pots, daily life interrupted with no time to run. These people were caught completely off guard. What's especially shocking is how quickly the tragedy unfolded. Within seconds, a wave of superheated gas and ash raced through the city at nearly 400 miles per hour, reaching temperatures of over 900 degrees Fahrenheit. There was no warning siren, no time to escape. Entire families, friends, neighbors, many of them never made it out of their homes. And yet, their stories didn't disappear. The ash became a time capsule, sealing in not only bodies, but emotions. In a way, this discovery has changed how people see ancient history. Pompeii isn't just a place with ruins, it's a place that still holds the echoes of real human lives. The plaster casts, especially the ones of children, have toured museums around the world. They've been recreated in documentaries, referenced in shows like Doctor Who, and studied in classrooms from Italy to California. These moments frozen in time continue to speak, louder than any scroll or inscription. It's easy to think of the Roman Empire as all marble columns and grand arenas. But discoveries like this strip away the grandeur and show us the quiet, tragic human side. Not generals or emperors, just everyday people whose lives were suddenly cut short. And in the silence of those molds, the world continues to listen. In 2007, on the outskirts of Mantua, Italy, a city known for Romeo and Juliet's tragic tale, archaeologists uncovered a real-life love story buried beneath the earth. Two human skeletons, locked in an embrace, were found in a Neolithic grave dated to nearly 6,000 years ago. Their heads were turned toward each other, their arms and legs intertwined so tightly that it looked like they had been holding on until the very end. Unlike many burial sites from that era, this one was free of signs of violence or ritual sacrifice. There were no weapons, no signs of trauma, and no indication of battle. Just two people, one male, one female, deliberately buried together in a pose so intimate that it stunned even seasoned archaeologists. This wasn't an accidental positioning. Someone laid them that way, carefully, meaningfully. For decades, archaeologists have dug up skeletons side by side. That's nothing new. But what made the Valdero pair different was the undeniable emotion it stirred. Viewers around the world saw photos of them and immediately felt something more than curiosity. They felt connection. Some even called it proof that love can survive death. It's not hard to see why. Their expressions are long gone, their stories forgotten, but the way they lie together still says everything. Interestingly, the burial was found near items like flint blades and tools, hinting that they weren't just laid to rest randomly. There may have been a deeper meaning, perhaps spiritual, perhaps symbolic. What makes it even more powerful is how little we know. They could have been partners, or siblings, or friends. Yet their pose leaves little room for doubt they mattered to each other deeply. Now known as the lovers of Valdaro, the two are preserved and displayed in a museum, encased in glass, side by side forever. Visitors walk by silently, often pausing longer than at any golden artifact or ancient statue. There's no famous name, no epic battle, just a single scene from prehistory that speaks volumes. In a world often fascinated by kings and conquests, these two humble skeletons remind us that connection, not power, is what lasts longest. On the island of Öland, off Sweden's southeastern coast, lies the quiet ruin of a once thriving village called Sandbyborg. But beneath its stone walls, archaeologists found a chilling scene that tells a story of sudden and total devastation. What they uncovered wasn't a battlefield or a burial ground, it was a massacre frozen in place. Inside the remains of homes, skeletons were found sprawled on the floors, still lying where they fell. There were no signs of burials, no efforts to move the bodies. Some had sword wounds to the skull. Others had their arms raised, as if trying to shield themselves. These people had been attacked without warning. There were signs of valuables left untouched. Gold, jewelry, tools, all still there, which meant it wasn't a raid for plunder. It was something personal, a message, total annihilation. What shocked archaeologists most was the silence that followed. The attackers didn't just kill, they wiped the place off the map. No one came back to bury the dead. The village was never rebuilt. For over 1,500 years, the remains lay undisturbed, slowly being absorbed into the soil until modern teams began digging in the 2010s. Some researchers believe the attack may have been part of a power struggle, one group wiping out a rival clan. But the sheer brutality combined with the deliberate abandonment suggests it was more than war. It was erasure. Today, Sandbyborg is one of the most haunting archaeological sites in Europe. The stones still stand, but now they carry the weight of a story that was never meant to be told. And thanks to archaeology, those who were silenced now speak again. Not with words, but with the positions they were found in and the silence that followed them. High in the icy peaks of the Andes, over 22,000 feet above sea level, a discovery was made that, honestly, shocked even the most experienced archaeologists. Inside a stone burial chamber on Argentina's Lulailaco volcano, a perfectly preserved young woman sat, her head tilted gently forward, her hair neatly braided, her face peaceful, but with a single tear streak frozen on her cheek. She became known as La Doncella, or the Maiden. She wasn't found lying down. She was seated in a ritual posture wrapped in fine textiles and surrounded by offerings, feathers, corn, ceremonial objects. Her preservation was astonishing. The cold, dry air had kept her skin, eyelashes, even her clothes almost intact for over 5 centuries. She looked more like a sleeping girl than a mummy. La Doncella was part of the Incan Capacocha ceremony, an offering to the gods made during times of drought or political uncertainty. Chosen for her beauty and status, she was taken from her community and brought to the summit of one of the highest volcanoes in the world. The journey would have taken weeks. When she reached the top, she was given a mixture of sacred herbs and alcohol to make her fall asleep. Then she was left to freeze in the thin mountain air. What makes this discovery so intense isn't just the level of preservation, it's the small details. Her face, still soft, her clothes folded carefully, her braids woven with care. Archaeologists who saw her up close say it felt like stepping into a moment frozen in time, but also deeply human, like meeting someone you can't help but feel for, even across centuries. La Doncella doesn't shout history at you, she whispers it. She doesn't come from a textbook. She comes from a place of silence and snow, where belief and sacrifice crossed paths, and the world still hasn't stopped listening. Across the foggy wetlands of northern Europe, archaeologists have uncovered some of the most haunting discoveries ever found: human remains buried not under stone or dirt, but deep in peat bogs. These bog bodies are so well preserved that even fingerprints and facial stubble can still be seen, despite dating back over 2,000 years. And you know, many of them are not adults. In Denmark, Ireland, and Germany, teams have uncovered bodies with intact hair, twisted limbs, and even visible eyelashes. Some were found with ropes around their necks, others with carefully placed offerings beside them. One particularly famous case is that of a teenage figure dubbed Wide Girl, discovered in the Netherlands. Her long red hair and peaceful face seemed to defy the centuries she'd spent buried in acidic mud. Why were these people placed in the bogs? Some believe they were sacrificed, possibly during tribal ceremonies asking for fertile land or victory in war. But what stands out is how ritualized and careful these burials were. These weren't random. These were significant. The peat worked like nature's freezer. Cool, low oxygen conditions stopped bacteria in their tracks, preserving skin, organs, and clothing. It's like opening a door to the Iron Age and finding someone waiting on the other side. These discoveries don't just teach us about ancient rituals. They connect us to real individuals from a distant world. They weren't myths. They were real, with lives and communities that vanished long ago. And thanks to the bogs, they never truly left. Right in the heart of Mexico City stands the remains of one of the most sacred and blood-soaked places in Mesoamerican history, the Templo Mayor. This massive stepped pyramid once towered over the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. And what archaeologists found beneath its layers has fascinated and, honestly, horrified people around the world. Excavations in recent decades revealed hundreds of human skulls arranged in towering racks called tzompantli. These were real structures the Aztecs built to display the heads of those sacrificed to the gods. Beneath the temple itself, they found offering pits packed with bones, obsidian blades, shells, and even jaguar remains. But what really shook researchers were the tightly packed skeletons, many with cut marks on the ribs and spines, showing how precise the rituals had been. This wasn't random violence. It followed strict ceremonial rules, often tied to the Aztec calendar, cosmic alignments, and seasonal cycles. The sun god needed strength, they believed, and strength came from life essence. The victims were often treated as honored guests before the ritual, fed well, adorned with elaborate paint and feathers, and led in procession to the temple summit. In one recent discovery, archaeologists found a large stone box filled with bones and carved skulls, buried beneath what would have been a public space. It wasn't hidden, it was meant to be seen. And today those bones speak more powerfully than any glyph or scroll ever could. These aren't just relics of a lost world. They're a chilling window into a civilization that saw life and death through a completely different lens. To them, sacrifice wasn't destruction. It was an offering to something bigger. And thanks to the archaeologists peeling back each layer of the Templo Mayor, that worldview is no longer a mystery. In the quiet countryside of Somerset, England, lies a place that looks peaceful enough from the outside. But inside Gough's cave, archaeologists uncovered something deeply unsettling. Bones more than 14,000 years old were scattered across the floor. At first it seemed like any other prehistoric site, but then they noticed something strange. The bones had cut marks. Clean, deliberate cuts like those made by tools used to process meat. Even more shocking, some of the skulls had been carefully shaped into bowls. These weren't accidents. This was intentional. Experts determined that these early humans weren't just surviving in harsh conditions. They were turning to practices that most societies would later abandon entirely. It wasn't about violence or punishment. It was about survival, and maybe even ritual. These people lived at the edge of the last ice age, when the land was cold, resources were scarce, and the line between life and death was razor thin. What makes this site so significant is how methodical everything was. The way the bones were stripped, the way the skulls were shaped, there was a system to it. Some scientists think it may have had spiritual meaning, not just a desperate attempt to endure the cold. The remains found at Gough's cave are now stored and studied under strict conditions, revealing more each year. The tools, bones, and markings tell a story that's uncomfortable but undeniable. These people did what they had to do to survive a brutal world. And in doing so, they left behind one of the oldest and most complex archaeological puzzles in British history. Everyone knows about Pompeii, but fewer have heard of Herculaneum, its smaller neighbor buried by the same volcanic eruption. While Pompeii was hit by a rain of ash, Herculaneum was smothered in a boiling wave of gas and mud that rushed in so fast it turned people to stone-like shells in seconds. When archaeologists began excavating a row of seaside boathouses, they expected to find storage rooms. Instead, they uncovered something far more devastating. Packed inside these shelters were over 300 people, huddled together, waiting for rescue that never came. Many of them were found clutching bags of jewelry, food, and tools, the most valuable items they could carry. They weren't running away from home. They were waiting to be saved. Some were resting against walls. Others lay curled up in the corners. They had gathered near the shore, likely hoping that Roman ships would arrive. But the heat wave reached them before any help did. In the blink of an eye, their lives were over, sealed in volcanic mud, so quickly that archaeologists later recovered their skeletons still wearing earrings, belts, and sandals. One particularly haunting find was of a soldier, still wearing a military belt and carrying a sword. He had made it that far, possibly guiding others to safety. He died doing so. The site is so well preserved that researchers were able to study their last meals from the contents of their stomachs. Unlike Pompeii's theatrical ruins, Herculaneum is quieter but more intimate. The faces aren't cast in plaster, they're bones frozen in place. Still, waiting, watching. And thanks to the volcanic flow that swallowed them, their story didn't end in silence. It was only paused until we uncovered it again. In the mid-1800s, two British ships, the HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, set out to chart the Northwest Passage, a sea route through the Arctic that had never been successfully mapped. The mission, led by Sir John Franklin, vanished without a trace. For over a century, no one knew what happened. Then, piece by piece, the Arctic began giving up its secrets. Archaeologists and forensic teams eventually found skeletal remains scattered across the harsh landscape of King William Island. The bodies showed signs of extreme cold exposure and malnutrition. Some had deep cuts in the bones, suggesting the unimaginable, people doing whatever they could to survive once the ships were trapped in ice. One haunting discovery was a pair of skeletal legs still inside woolen trousers, found alone on the tundra. In another case, a makeshift boat was found, loaded with silverware, books, and human bones. These weren't seasoned Arctic explorers by that point. They were exhausted men carrying symbols of home through a frozen wasteland. As recently as the last decade, archaeologists discovered the sunken remains of both ships, eerily well preserved in the icy water. Plates, tools, even leather boots remained on board. But it's the human stories found in fragments along the shoreline that leave the strongest impression. The Franklin expedition wasn't lost as some sudden disaster. It slowly unraveled, step by step, mile by mile. The starved remains aren't just bones. They're what's left of an ambition that reached too far into the cold and paid the ultimate price. What began as a triumph of exploration ended in one of history's quietest, saddest collapses. So, when locals in Andhra Pradesh spotted this massive creature on the riverbank, it honestly didn't look like anything you'd find in a biology textbook. It had this really tough, scaly skin, a head that looked a lot like a giant lizard, and these long, pale appendages spilling out from a torn section of its body. People gathered in no time, snapping photos and, speculating whether it was some ancient beast, a prehistoric survivor, or maybe something entirely unknown. The truth, though, while less mythical, was just as fascinating. Experts actually identified the creature as a bloated and decomposing deep-sea animal, possibly a really large oarfish or whale distorted by time, gases, and the river conditions. Those strange white tentacles? They were actually muscle tissues and intestines, pushed out by pressure during decay. Still, despite the scientific explanation, the discovery kind of reignited old stories in the region, tales of river serpents and forgotten creatures from local folklore. And in that moment, the line between science and legend blurred, proving once again that, the natural world can still surprise us in ways that feel almost otherworldly. In 2016, while excavating a construction site near Athens, archaeologists unearthed a discovery that raised more questions than it answered. Lying side by side in neat rows were dozens of skeletons, men with their arms and legs bound in iron shackles. Their bones dated back over 2,500 years to the rise of ancient democracy, and nobody had ever seen anything quite like it. These weren't criminals dumped in a pit. Their bodies were carefully lined up, suggesting that someone took the time to organize this mass burial. Yet their bindings remained on, rusted and fused to the bones. Some were even chained in pairs. The precision of the scene felt both clinical and tragic. Experts believe the victims may have been part of a failed uprising, possibly supporters of a political figure trying to seize control. Their execution, done in one swift wave, was likely meant to send a message. No tombstones, no honors, just iron, dirt, and silence. The most chilling part is how well the bodies were preserved. The bone alignment, the position of the shackles, even traces of the straps used to bind them. Everything was intact. It gave archaeologists a rare opportunity to understand how power worked in the ancient world, especially during its darker moments. While Athens is celebrated as the birthplace of democracy, this grave reminds us that progress wasn't always peaceful. Beneath the temples and theaters lie the remains of real people caught in the political currents of the time. People who likely never made it into the history books until now. When the RMS Titanic sank in the North Atlantic in 1912, over 1,500 people lost their lives in one of the most iconic maritime tragedies ever recorded. The ship was a floating palace filled with everything from mahogany staircases to full orchestras. But deep beneath the waves, it became something else entirely, a graveyard, resting 2 miles below the surface. For decades, the wreck remained untouched. Then in the 1980s, it was finally found. The images were surreal. Dinner plates still stacked, shoes resting where bodies once lay, unopened bottles of wine scattered across the ocean floor. But what stunned researchers the most were the eerie traces of the passengers themselves. While human remains were mostly gone, their outlines, footwear, clothing, and personal items remained in place. frozen in time by the deep sea's stillness. In one spot, a pair of leather shoes lay side by side next to a pocket watch and a comb. It was clear someone had once been there, perhaps waiting, perhaps holding on to hope. These remnants weren't just artifacts. They were silent witnesses, and yet despite the sadness, nothing about the Titanic wreck feels staged. It's real. Down there in the dark, where there's no sound and almost no light, the everyday items speak louder than words. Eyeglasses, toothbrushes, letters, each one a memory that drifted down with the ship and stayed there. Beneath the busy streets of Paris, far below the cafes and fashion houses, there's a hidden world that once held more people than the city above. In the 18th century, overflowing cemeteries forced city officials to begin moving the dead into old stone quarries underground. Over time, this vast labyrinth turned into what we now know as the Paris catacombs. But what most visitors don't realize is that beyond the candlelit tourist paths lie countless sealed vaults that have never been mapped, and when they're opened, the silence is overwhelming. In recent years, archaeologists working under the streets near old convents and churches uncovered multiple burial vaults packed floor to ceiling with human bones. These weren't the decorative skull walls tourists see. These were hidden chambers, some still filled with the smell of ancient decay, sealed off centuries ago and forgotten as the city grew on top of them. What makes these vaults different is what was left behind with the dead. Old wooden coffins, rusted keys, scraps of cloth, and once even a carefully folded letter tucked beneath a femur. In one case, the bones were mixed with construction debris, suggesting that when buildings were renovated centuries ago, they simply tossed human remains aside and bricked them up. Forensic teams studying the remains found signs of overcrowding, stress, and illness, evidence that many of these people lived difficult lives during times of plague, war, or famine. In one vault, they discovered layers of bones stacked in such a way that it looked like people had been added in waves, possibly during a deadly epidemic. Today, these hidden corners of Paris are being studied slowly, quietly, and with great care. Some vaults are too dangerous to open, and others are so deep that modern equipment struggles to reach them. But what's already been found paints a haunting picture. Beneath one of the world's most celebrated cities lies a city of the forgotten. Not kings, not heroes, just ordinary people packed together in the dark, their stories locked behind stone walls for hundreds of years until now. Just a few steps beneath one of the oldest roads in Rome lies a hidden maze that most tourists never realize they're walking over. The Appian Way, a place where people now jog, bike, and snap selfies, hides a world that once echoed with whispered prayers and the quiet fear of being caught. These are the catacombs of San Sebastiano, not just tunnels, but a secret underground city of the dead stretching over 7 miles. Long before Christianity became legal, believers buried their dead here in deep chambers carved from soft volcanic rock called tuff. When you step down into this dimly lit underworld, the temperature drops, and so does your sense of direction. It's easy to feel like you've left the modern world behind. Walls are lined with narrow horizontal slots, each one a grave. Doves, anchors, fish. Others show frescoes so well preserved you'd think they were painted a few decades ago. In fact, the artwork found here includes some of the earliest known Christian imagery anywhere in the world. This place isn't just about bones and ancient art, though. It also has a strange connection to one of the Roman Empire's most famous soldiers turned saints, Sebastian. According to tradition, he was buried here after surviving a barrage of arrows, only to be later killed for good and laid to rest in these catacombs. His story made the site so popular that it became one of the first official pilgrimage spots in Christian Rome. What's really surprising is how massive this network is. Only a small portion is open to the public, but archaeologists have explored multiple levels, some descending over 40 feet. These layers weren't built all at once, they were expanded as more space was needed. Some sections show signs of collapse or intentional sealing, raising questions about what might still be hidden back there. Lost shrines? Forgotten relics? If this sounds like something out of Indiana Jones or the Da Vinci Code, you're not far off. This isn't a staged museum exhibit. It's real, untouched history buried right beneath your feet. And it's just the beginning. Beneath the Colosseum's massive arena lies something far more complex than crumbling stone. The hypogeum, an underground system of tunnels, elevators, and cages, was the engine room of ancient Rome's most extreme spectacles. It's where wild animals were staged, where warriors prepared in silence, and where illusions were crafted to shock tens of thousands watching above. This was ancient show business, and the stakes were deadly. Gladiators didn't just walk out, they appeared. Trapdoors snapped open, elevators rose from the floor, and exotic creatures seemed to materialize out of nowhere. Much of that magic was made possible by a system so advanced it rivaled stagecraft from centuries later. Some lifts were powered by treadmills, others by intricate counterweights. Crews of men worked behind the scenes like stagehands in a modern arena. And for centuries, it was all buried. Grass and earth completely covered the hypogeum until the 19th century, when archaeologists finally began to excavate what had been hidden since the fall of the empire. Even now, only parts of it are open to the public. New passageways, stairwells, and wall niches are still being discovered. Some areas remain sealed, others completely unexplored. Here's the kind of scene that captures its atmosphere perfectly. It's exactly what the hypogeum might look like if something unexpected were uncovered today. The air down there carries weight. Standing among the arches, it's easy to feel the pressure that once built with each creaking pulley and muffled shout. For gladiators, this space was a holding cell and a launch pad. You didn't just enter the arena, you were lifted into it, sometimes after hours waiting in the dark, hearing nothing but distant cheering above. The scale of engineering is hard to overstate. Platforms large enough to raise an entire group of lions. Stage pieces for reenacting mythological scenes, temples, trees, or ships, hoisted through the floor. Every detail timed to shock the crowd and fuel the drama. And although the crowd's gone silent, the structure remains. Part machine, part graveyard, part mystery. The deeper you go into the Colosseum, the more it reveals, not in noise, but in echoes. At street level, the Basilica of San Clemente looks like a beautiful old church. Nice frescoes, peaceful atmosphere, the usual. But beneath the floor lies something much bigger, or rather, older. Go downstairs and you enter another church from the 4th century. Keep going, and you're suddenly standing in a Roman home from nearly 2,000 years ago, complete with a temple to a secret god. This spot is like a vertical timeline you can walk through. Each layer represents a different chapter in Rome's story, medieval on top, early Christian below, and then a shadowy space dedicated to the cult of Mithras at the very bottom. It's hard to believe that all of this sits just a few blocks from the Colosseum. In the lowest chamber, you'll find a small altar showing Mithras slaying a bull, his signature act. The space is tight and silent, built for ceremonies that weren't meant to be seen by outsiders. The fact that this temple survived it all is incredible. Above it, Roman homes were built, and above those, churches. Like someone pressed build again every few hundred years without tearing the old one down. What's even crazier is how well preserved everything is. In the 4th century church, parts of mosaics and inscriptions still cling to the walls. The sound of water still trickles through ancient pipes. And on your way back up as daylight returns, it's like climbing through time in reverse. If HBO ever shot a time travel show through Roman history, this would be the perfect set. You've probably heard the name Nero, the emperor with a flair for fire and drama. But what he left behind, buried under centuries of earth, is beyond dramatic. It's the Domus Aurea, or the Golden House, a sprawling underground palace, so luxurious it made even Roman elites blush. And today, it's hidden right beneath a public park. The palace was designed to impress and shock. Nero built it after the Great Fire of Rome, using land that had belonged to the city. Walls were once covered in gold leaf and gemstones. Ceilings were painted with elaborate frescoes. There was even a dining room with a rotating ceiling, possibly powered by slaves turning hidden gears. Yes, that extra. After Nero died, later emperors were so embarrassed by the excess that they filled the entire palace with dirt and built over it. For nearly 2,000 years, it stayed underground, until Renaissance artists crawling through holes in the earth accidentally rediscovered it. That's where the word grotesque comes from. They were painting scenes in grottos and didn't know they were standing in a palace. Now you can visit the Domus Aurea on special tours. You walk through long corridors with painted walls and massive columns still intact. Some areas are pitch dark and suddenly open into chambers where natural light filters through from ancient skylights above. Even after centuries of silence, it still feels like Nero could return and throw a banquet any second. Right next to Trajan's column stands a regular-looking government building. Nothing fancy on the outside. But under the Palazzo Valentini is one of the best preserved time capsules of Roman luxury living you'll ever see. These aren't ruins in the usual sense. They're complete rooms. We're talking tiled floors with detailed mosaics, private baths with marble benches, and underground heating systems that still baffle modern architects. Thanks to clever glass flooring, you can walk above these second-century homes while looking down into history. What makes this site stand out is how immersive it feels. The lights are timed to highlight different areas, glowing under mosaics, casting shadows along ancient walls. Projections and effects even help recreate what the rooms might have looked like when people actually lived there. And they weren't just anyone. These homes belonged to powerful Roman families, likely senators. You'll spot bathing rooms with carefully engineered ventilation, courtyards built to let in light without flooding when it rained, and hidden service corridors where workers stayed out of sight. Every inch was planned. This isn't a ruin you have to imagine. It's a life-size cutaway of elite Roman life, right underneath your shoes. If Assassin's Creed had a luxury real estate DLC, this would be the flagship property. Right beneath the roaring grounds of ancient chariot races, just under the Circus Maximus, there's something most Romans had no clue was there a secret underground temple used by followers of the god Mithras. While the crowds above cheered for their favorite teams, a completely different scene was unfolding in the shadows below. The Mithraeum is dim, narrow, and deeply symbolic. Carved out of rock, its design mirrors a cave. Mithras was believed to have slain a bull in a sacred cavern, and every temple honoring him followed the same layout. Two long benches line the central aisle, where initiates likely sat during rituals. At the far end is a carved relief of Mithras in the act of bull slaying, a powerful image meant to represent cosmic rebirth and strength. This cult wasn't open to everyone. It was invitation only, typically limited to soldiers, officials, and merchants. Meetings were private. The ceremonies are still a mystery because followers were sworn to silence. But archaeologists have found signs of symbolic feasts, stages of initiation, and even clues pointing to astrological connections. Standing in this quiet, torchlit room feels like stepping into a secret society. It's small but intense, built for ritual, not spectacle. While thousands watched races just feet above, this hidden chamber echoed with chants and silence, dedicated to a god outsiders barely knew. It's the kind of place you wouldn't believe existed unless you saw it with your own eyes. In the middle of all the grandeur and marble statues, there's a piece of ancient Roman infrastructure that still does its job more than 2 millennia later. It's not glamorous, but honestly, it might be one of the most important reasons Rome ever became a superpower. Welcome to the Cloaca Maxima, the Great Drain. Built around the 6th century BCE, this massive underground sewer was designed to carry water and waste away from the city's low-lying areas. And believe it or not, it still flows today. That's not just a figure of speech. Parts of the original structure are still channeling runoff into the Tiber River. But the Cloaca Maxima isn't just some old pipe. It's a monument to early Roman engineering. Made with volcanic stone and lined with brick, it was built to last, and clearly it did. Roman engineers understood slope, water pressure, and durability long before the word infrastructure even existed. Some sections are actually wide enough for people to walk through. There's even a legend that the sewer once carried away the water from a mythical lake that covered the forum, turning it into buildable land. Whether that's true or not, what is true is that this system helped Rome avoid flooding, disease, and urban chaos at a time when most cities didn't even have basic drainage. It might not be as flashy as the Colosseum, but honestly, it's just as impressive. A massive, ancient artery still pumping quietly under one of the busiest cities in the world. Just off Rome's bustling Via Veneto, beneath a quiet little church, lies one of the most visually haunting places in the city. It's not scary in a horror movie way, it's eerie in a thoughtful, almost artistic sense. This is the crypt of the Capuchin monks, where the bones of over 4,000 friars have been arranged into complex designs across the walls and ceilings. Chandeliers made of vertebrae, arches lined with skulls, crosses crafted from femurs. Every room in the crypt has a theme, and each is decorated using real human remains. It sounds grim, but the intent was never to frighten. This was a spiritual message built by monks who believed that death wasn't an end, just a step forward. Some of the skeletons are fully dressed in Capuchin robes, resting in niches as if they're still on duty. Others are arranged into patterns that reflect symbols of resurrection and eternity. One chamber features an inscription that loosely translates to "What you are now, we once were. We once. What we are now, you shall be." It's the ultimate Roman version of perspective. The crypt was constructed in the 17th century when the friars brought bones from their old monastery. And while it's definitely one of the strangest sights in Rome, it's also one of the most unforgettable. Think of it like a message carved in bone, not about fear but about reflection. And somehow, despite all this, it's peaceful, quiet, almost meditative, the kind of place that sticks with you long after you've left. Right now, if you toss a coin into the Trevi Fountain, that water didn't just come from a pipe under the street. It came from a source 13 miles away, carried underground by a Roman aqueduct that's over 2,000 years old, and still working. That's the Aqua Virgo, one of the oldest functioning water systems on Earth. Built in 19 BCE by Marcus Agrippa, this aqueduct was a gift to the city. Unlike many others that traveled across towering arches, the Aqua Virgo was mostly underground, protected from weather, enemies, and earthquakes. And it worked so well that it continued to supply water to central Rome, even as empires rose and fell. What's incredible is how precise the engineering was. The slope from source to fountain is so subtle, only about 1 inch per 300 feet, but it keeps water flowing without pressure pumps, just gravity. At one point, it even ran directly beneath the baths of Agrippa, feeding pools and heating systems that amazed ancient visitors. Today, you can visit parts of the original channel. It runs beneath modern streets, sneaking between shops, homes, and museums. While most cities are replacing water mains every few decades, Rome is still using one that predates the New Testament. Every drop that flows from the Trevi isn't just water, it's history. Clear, cold, and straight from a system so well built that modern cities are still trying to catch up. Right next to one of Rome's busiest train intersections, buried under the modern tracks, is a secret that took everyone by surprise. Workers in the 1910s accidentally discovered a perfectly preserved underground basilica, one that no Roman had seen in nearly 2,000 years. And to this day, no one knows exactly who built it or why. The layout is unlike any Christian basilica. Instead of crosses or saints, the walls are covered with stucco figures from Roman mythology, Hercules, Orpheus, and scenes with strange symbolic creatures. 3 naves, a central apse, intricate decorations. It looks religious, but not in the way people expect. It may have been used by a mysterious cult, possibly Neo-Pythagorean philosophers with secret rites and symbols. The entire space was carved underground and reinforced with concrete to avoid collapse. That's how it survived untouched for centuries. One theory? The owners hid it on purpose. A secret meeting place safe from the eyes of the empire. Soft lighting now reveals the details: vines, stars, spirals, every panel whispering something lost to time. The craftsmanship is elite. The message? Still unsolved. Standing in that space with trains rushing above and ancient silence below, you feel the weight of history colliding. Rome isn't just a city layered in stone, it's layered in meaning. You won't find it on a postcard, but down in the catacombs of Priscilla is one of the most significant artworks in early Christian history, possibly the first ever image of the Virgin Mary. It's not on display in a grand museum. It's painted on a wall in a quiet burial chamber. The catacombs themselves are massive. Over 5 miles of tunnels dug out beneath a Roman noblewoman's estate in the 2nd century. Early Christians used this space not just to bury the dead, but also to carve out a safe spiritual identity at a time when public worship wasn't always safe. The most talked about chamber is the cubiculum of the Veiled Woman. Inside, there's a delicate fresco of a woman holding a child, with a star above them and a man pointing toward it. Many believe this is Mary with the infant Jesus, and that the man could be the prophet Balaam, referencing a star from ancient texts. That's not the only art here. You'll see fish, peacocks, anchors, and early symbols of hope and eternity. The frescoes were painted with care, often glowing under soft light, preserved by centuries of silence. This site isn't dramatic in size, but it's powerful in presence. It's where belief was first given shape, not in grand sculptures or stained glass, but in simple brush strokes hidden underground, and that's exactly what makes it unforgettable. Most visitors walk through the Roman Forum without realizing they're passing by one of the most ancient and mysterious spots in the entire city. It's marked by a simple slab of black marble, the lapis niger. But that stone isn't just a marker. It's covering what many believe is the oldest religious site in Rome. Beneath the slab lies an ancient altar, a column base, and a stone block inscribed in Old Latin, the kind of language even most Romans wouldn't have understood. This isn't a tourist setup. It's raw, untouched history. The inscription includes words about kings, priests, and curses. Some scholars think it's tied to Romulus himself, the legendary founder of Rome. Next to it stands the circular Temple of Romulus, not the mythical one, but another Romulus, the son of Emperor Maxentius. Its massive bronze doors are original, and yes, they still work. Step inside and you're surrounded by a quiet that feels almost out of sync with the chaos outside. Thick stone walls, soft light through the oculus above, it's like being frozen in a different time. What makes this area so incredible is how small it is, yet how much power it holds. It's not flashy, but it might be one of the few places in Rome that's still sacred, even after thousands of years. The Forum may be the city's political heart, but this is its soul. While thousands of tourists snap selfies at the Trevi Fountain, few realize what's lurking just beneath their feet. Just a few steps away, behind an unassuming doorway, there's an entrance to the Vicus Caprarius, an entire buried neighborhood from ancient Rome. This isn't just another ruin. It's a complete section of the city that dates all the way back to the 1st century. You'll find remains of Roman apartment buildings, marble staircases, courtyards, and even plumbing systems that are, well, still intact. And right in the middle of it all, a giant underground cistern filled with crystal clear water from the Aqua Virgo aqueduct, the same water that powers the Trevi Fountain above. Walking through the Vicus Caprarius honestly feels surreal. You're surrounded by brick walls and mosaic floors that once held the everyday lives of ancient Romans. One moment you're seeing the base of a luxury home, the next, a piece of pottery stuck between stones, left exactly where it was dropped. This spot is often called the City of Water, and it really lives up to the name. Moisture glistens on the walls, and the constant flow of water makes it feel, alive. It's not just a static display, it breathes with the rhythm of the city above. The contrast is wild chaos upstairs, forgotten peace below. And yet both worlds are connected by the same stream that's been flowing for 2,000 years. Most museums in Rome show you objects taken from the ground. The Crypta Balbi lets you walk through the ground itself. It's actually one of the only places in the city where you can see the layers of history, literally stacked on top of each other, without ever leaving the building. Originally built as part of a theater complex in the 1st century BCE, the Crypta Balbi started out as a grand public space. But what really makes it special is what happened after. As Rome changed, so did this block. It became a workshop zone, then a residential area, then a dumping ground during the medieval era, and eventually part of a monastery. Today, you can walk through the excavation itself. Glass walkways guide you over ancient floors, walls cut through different time periods. A single room might show 4 centuries of change in its brickwork. It's kind of like scrolling through a city's entire life story without ever turning a page. There's just something about seeing that kind of time compressed into one physical space that, well, it's different. A Roman coin here, a Byzantine jar there, even discarded tools left behind by craftsmen who had no idea they were part of a future museum. Crypta Balbi isn't as famous as the Colosseum, but honestly, it might be more personal. It doesn't show you what Rome wanted you to see, it shows you what people actually did, how they adapted, built, tore down, and started again. And that's what makes it so real. Hidden beneath the surface of the world's most famous religious city is a web of passages that, honestly, few people ever see. While millions stroll through St. Peter's Square above, deep below runs a quiet maze designed for moments when things didn't go as planned. These underground routes aren't marked on tourist maps, but they've played a key role in keeping the Vatican strong through centuries of chaos and change. One of the most intriguing paths leads from the Vatican walls to a distant fortress. From the outside, it looks like nothing more than part of the city's defenses. But behind those walls, a passage was once used in moments of crisis, silent, narrow, and built for quick disappearances. It's not just legend. The history books actually back it up. And that's just one example. Beneath the surface, there are additional routes, chambers, and corridors connecting key parts of the Vatican. Some lead to storerooms, others to hidden corners that haven't been touched in ages. The mix of ancient stonework and modern reinforcements makes it feel like something between a Roman ruin and, I guess, a Cold War bunker. What exactly lies behind some of those sealed doors? That's still unclear, but it's the mystery that makes it so fascinating. The Vatican isn't just a center of faith, it's a city with layers of strategy built into its foundations. In a place known for light, the deepest stories are hidden in shadow, and sometimes the quietest places hold the loudest secrets. In the bustling city of Lima, one of South America's most crowded capitals, construction workers laying a gas pipeline made a discovery that stunned archaeologists. The naturally preserved mummy of a child who had been buried for nearly 1,000 years. The astonishing find occurred in the Puente Piedra district, just beneath a modern street. where layers of history lie quietly beneath the feet of millions. Just 1.2 meters underground, they found the crouched body of a child, aged around 10 to 15, wrapped tightly in a burial shroud. His knees were drawn to his chest, arms crossed, a signature posture of the region's ancient funerary practices. But what truly shocked everyone? Even after a millennium, the boy's dark brown hair remained intact, a haunting and vivid reminder of the life he once lived. Surrounding the body were calabashes, dried gourds once used to store water and ceremonial substances, alongside ceramic jugs, plates, and bottles, some decorated with geometric designs and scenes of fishermen. These artifacts point to the Hankey culture, a little-known but once thriving fishing civilization that flourished in the Lima region between 1000 and 1470 AD, before being absorbed by the Inca Empire. Experts believe the find could unlock new knowledge about the rituals, daily life, and spiritual beliefs of the Chankay people, one of Peru's pre-Inca cultures still wrapped in mystery. Was this child a fisherman's son, a ritual offering, or someone of higher status? His perfectly preserved hair and burial goods may hold the answers. In Peru, such preservation is often aided by the country's arid climate. The dry air rapidly dehydrates soft tissue, halting decay in a process known as natural mummification. But in this case, the ritual pose and the burial offerings suggest it may have also involved intentional mummification practices, tied to beliefs about the afterlife. And to think, it all lay just beneath the pavement. In 1932, deep in the rugged mountains near San Pedro, Wyoming, two prospectors searching for gold cracked open a hidden cave and found something they couldn't explain. Inside, perched on a small ledge, sat what looked like a tiny human body. But this was no ordinary discovery. The figure was no more than 7 inches tall in its sitting position, with leathery skin, bulging eyes, and a flattened skull. Its teeth were sharp, its arms crossed, and it had been preserved with such detail that even the fingernails were visible. The local press exploded with headlines about a possible little person or ancient being from forgotten tribes. Some speculated it was a hoax. Others insisted it was real, a lost chapter of Native American folklore that spoke of miniature humans who lived in the hills. The mummy even had x-rays taken which revealed a full skeleton and internal organs. This wasn't a doll or carving, it had once been alive. For years, the mummy traveled from museum to museum, even displayed in a glass case in a local shop, drawing curious eyes and wild theories. Some claimed it had reptilian features, others swore it was an alien. But more recent forensic analysis pointed towards something more grounded, yet still deeply mysterious: the remains of a very small infant, likely suffering from a rare condition that altered bone growth and body development. Still, questions remain. How did it end up perfectly preserved in a mountain cave? Who placed it there, and why? Even today, the San Pedro mummy sparks debates online and in cryptozoology circles. It's been compared to something out of the X-Files or Stranger Things, a relic of the unexplained, tucked into the landscape of the American West. What makes it so compelling isn't just its size, but the aura of mystery that still clings to it. A creature so small yet capable of shaking our sense of what's possible. Behind glass in a quiet temple in Japan rests a creature that seems pulled straight from a nightmare, or a myth. About a foot long with sharp claws, a twisted humanoid face, and a body that ends in a scaly fishtail, this so-called mermaid mummy has baffled scientists and priests for generations. It looks like something you'd expect to see washed up in a pirate legend or guarding a cursed relic in a movie. Its origin? Possibly the 1700s. It was found in a wooden box with an old note claiming it had been caught in the waters near Kochi Prefecture. Priests kept it hidden for centuries, treating it more as a sacred object than a specimen. According to ancient folklore, creatures like this brought disaster if disrespected, but granted longevity if honored. When researchers were finally allowed to examine it, what they found was clever craftsmanship, layers of paper, cloth, and animal parts stitched together with careful detail. The upper half had the mouth of a monkey and tiny fangs, while the bottom resembled a real fish. But under the strangeness lies something deeper. It reflects how ancient people processed the unknown, combining nature and belief into something physical. Modern science may have explained the how, but the why remains just as strange. Why build such a thing? Who placed it in a temple, and why keep it secret for so long? The mermaid mummy is part hoax, part cultural relic, and part living question. And it still draws visitors who can't help but wonder, what if? Under the dim lights of Palermo's Capuchin catacombs lies one of the most hauntingly lifelike mummies ever preserved. Her name is Rosalia Lombardo. With her delicate eyelashes, flawless skin, and golden curls resting gently on silk pillows, she looks like a child peacefully napping. But she's been resting like that for over 100 years. Rosalia passed away in the early 20th century, and her grieving father sought out the best embalmer of the time. What followed was a preservation process so perfect that her body became a wonder of the modern world. Using a secret formula, now partially known, she was infused with chemicals that halted decay in its tracks. Even today, her organs remain intact. What truly startled the internet in recent years was a time-lapse video. In it, her eyes appeared to open slightly, then close again. Millions watched in fascination and unease. Some said it was a miracle, others feared something paranormal. But experts explained the effect. Changes in humidity and lighting inside her sealed glass case made her eyelids shift subtly, giving the illusion of blinking. Still, seeing a preserved girl open her eyes, even for a second, has a way of sticking with you. Rosalia's case is more than just a story of incredible preservation. It's a quiet echo of a family's love, a scientist's unmatched skill, and the fragile line between life and memory. In Denmark's silent peat bogs, the past doesn't just linger, it stares back. One of the most astonishing finds in European archaeology is the Tolland Man, a body pulled from the soil so perfectly preserved that his eyelashes and stubble were still visible. His skin is stained dark by the acids in the bog, but his peaceful expression remains as if frozen mid-dream. Tolland Man wasn't alone. Across northern Europe, dozens of similar bodies have been uncovered from bogs in Ireland, Germany, the Netherlands, and the UK. Some are curled as if sleeping, others with evidence of strange rituals. What preserved them wasn't cold or chemicals, but nature's own chemistry. The unique combination of low oxygen, high acidity, and cold temperatures in peat bogs stops decay entirely, and in some cases even preserves the last meal in their stomachs. Archaeologists have used these clues to piece together daily life from thousands of years ago, learning what they wore, what they ate, and what ceremonies they may have been part of. But mystery still hangs in the mist. Some of the bodies show marks of violence, but it's debated whether these were acts of punishment, sacrifice, or part of a forgotten rite. Unlike stone ruins or clay pots, bog mummies still have fingerprints. And that's what makes them unforgettable. These were real people, trapped between nature and myth, pulled back into daylight by chance and curiosity. It's hard to believe she lived 2 millennia ago. When Lady Di was uncovered in a sealed tomb in China, scientists were stunned. Her body still had soft, elastic skin. Her veins were visible, her joints were bendable. Even her internal organs were intact, heart, lungs, stomach, preserved as though she had only recently passed. Lady Di, also known as Xin Zhui, was a noblewoman from the Han Dynasty. Her tomb was discovered in the 1970s in Changsha, buried deep underground in a massive layered coffin system that kept out air, moisture, and decay. Surrounding her were hundreds of artifacts, silk robes, lacquered dishes, musical instruments, and scrolls describing health and wellness routines. But nothing was more remarkable than her body itself. Researchers even found traces of melon seeds in her digestive system, likely the last thing she ate. It was a level of preservation unmatched by any other ancient mummy in Asia. Her secret? A mysterious fluid inside her coffin and an airtight seal that created a near-perfect time capsule. Scientists have studied her body for decades, hoping to understand the techniques that made it possible. Lady Di remains not just a marvel of preservation, but a link to a world long vanished, one where medicine, ritual, and elite craftsmanship collided to defeat time itself. Her body changed how we think about ancient burial practices, and even now, she's teaching us more about the past with every examination. High atop Mount Amparo in southern Peru, where the air is razor-thin and the ground stays frozen year-round, a bundle of cloth once peeked out from melting ice. What it contained changed everything. Inside was the body of a girl, so well preserved that her skin still had color, her clothes still clung to her, and her long dark braids remained nearly untouched by time. Nicknamed Juanita, she belonged to the Inca Empire and had been laid to rest over 500 years ago as part of a sacred ritual. She wasn't buried in a tomb, but on a mountaintop, close to the sky, closer to the gods. What preserved her so perfectly wasn't any human technique, but the cold. Sub-zero temperatures and dry air turned her into one of the most astonishing natural mummies ever found. Her body told a quiet story. Her final meals, her ceremonial garments, even her teeth, all examined with today's technology, revealed how seriously the Inca treated these rites. Surrounding her were carved figurines and offerings made from fine shells and precious metals. This wasn't an ordinary burial, it was a moment frozen in time. Now housed in a specially designed, temperature-controlled case, Juanita draws thousands of visitors every year. Her face is serene, as if she's just resting, untouched by centuries of wind and ice. Her preservation isn't just a biological marvel, it's a rare human connection to one of the most powerful civilizations in South America. Buried beneath layers of permafrost on the Siberian steppe, archaeologists uncovered a royal from a vanished world. She was covered in intricate tattoos, swirling beasts and mythic creatures stretched across her shoulders and arms. Her nickname? The Siberian Ice Princess. But she was no myth. She lived 2,500 years ago and belonged to the Pazyryk culture, a nomadic people of the Altai Mountains. When her tomb was opened, the dry ice had done its work perfectly. Her skin was still soft, her hair was intact. Even the contents of her stomach gave scientists a snapshot of her final days. But the tattoos were what truly set her apart. Inked designs so detailed and complex that they could pass for modern body art. Her burial was elaborate. She wore a tall felt headdress, silk clothing, and was surrounded by finely carved goods and ceremonial items. 2 horses lay nearby, symbols of her high rank. Whether she was a priestess, a noblewoman, or both, she clearly held power in life and was honored in death. For centuries, her tomb remained hidden, sealed beneath a climate that would one day become her protector. Now, her story stretches across millennia, carried not in stone or script, but in ink under her ancient skin. In a vault meant for royalty, Egyptian archaeologists once came across something deeply unsettling: a mummy with its mouth frozen wide open, locked in a silent scream. Its body was wrapped not in fine linen, but in a rough goatskin shroud. It didn't look regal, it looked out of place. And for years, no one could figure out who it was. Recent studies point to a shocking theory. This may be the body of Prince Pentower, the son of Pharaoh Rameses III, who was part of a palace conspiracy to take the throne. If the records are right, Pentower was caught and forced to take his own life as punishment. His burial breaks every rule of Egyptian royal custom. No golden amulets, no painted coffin, no honor. But here's where things get stranger. Despite the chaos surrounding his burial, the body was incredibly well preserved. The mouth agape, hands clenched, skin still taut. It's the kind of preservation that raises more questions than answers. Was it trauma, a burial mistake, or something intentional? Today, he's one of the most visually disturbing mummies on display in the Cairo Museum. While most mummies inspire awe, this one stirs unease. It doesn't feel ancient, it feels human. Not just a relic, but a moment of fear, power, and betrayal sealed in silence for eternity. It's barely 6 inches long. Its skull is abnormally large with slanted eye sockets and a pointed head. Its bones are thin but hardened, and the entire figure looks like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. When photos of this tiny skeleton surfaced online, theories spread like wildfire. Some swore it was an alien. Found in Chile's Atacama Desert, one of the driest places on Earth, the skeleton, dubbed Ada, was discovered wrapped in cloth near a ghost town. Its bizarre shape led to years of speculation. Cryptozoologists, UFO enthusiasts, and journalists debated endlessly over what this figure could be. But science stepped in. DNA analysis showed Ada was, in fact, human-likely a fetus with a combination of rare genetic conditions that dramatically altered bone development. Despite its size and alien-like features, Ada had a human story, one rooted in biology rather than science fiction. Even so, it remains one of the most unusual mummified remains ever found. Ada's form still fuels online discussion, and its mysterious appearance continues to fascinate. In a world obsessed with the unexplained, sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. He ruled Egypt for over 60 years, led massive military campaigns, and built some of the most iconic temples in history. Rameses II was a force of nature, and thousands of years after his reign, his body still speaks volumes. When his mummy was unwrapped, one thing stood out above all: his hair. Thick, reddish-orange strands still clung to his scalp. Some believed it had turned that color naturally after death. Others suggested it had been dyed while he was still alive, possibly as a symbol of divine power or royal identity. Unlike many other Egyptian mummies, Rameses II was treated with the utmost care. His coffin was packed with resin, his features still distinguishable, and his burial was so well preserved that even his nose and jawline survived the centuries. He was flown to France in the late 20th century for examination, and even issued a passport by the Egyptian government, listing his occupation as king deceased. The researchers discovered not just signs of old age and arthritis, but also active preservation methods that set his mummy apart from others. Ramesses wasn't just a king, he was a living monument, and even in death he still holds court in museum halls and history books. His mummy isn't a remnant, it's a legacy with red hair and a presence that refuses to fade. Found by hikers in the Alps, Ötzi didn't just change archaeology, he reset the timeline. He's over 5,000 years old, making him Europe's oldest natural mummy, and he didn't die of cold or starvation. He was murdered. Ötzi was found face down in melting ice, his skin leathery but preserved, his gear scattered around him like a survivalist's kit. A copper axe, stone tools, a longbow, dried food. He wore a bearskin hat and grass cape, and his shoes were insulated with hay. For years, scientists studied his body, peeling back layers of mystery. Then came the shocking part. CT scans revealed an arrowhead lodged in his shoulder. He'd been shot from behind, likely bled out, and collapsed where he stood. The scene hadn't been disturbed for millennia. His final meals, grains, and wild goat were still in his stomach. His tattoos, over 60 of them, aligned with acupuncture points, hinting at early pain therapy. Ötzi's story is ancient, but it feels startlingly modern. A man on the move, armed, possibly fleeing or ambushed, carrying tools, medicine, and secrets to his grave. Today, his body is housed in a climate-controlled chamber in Italy, where visitors peer through the glass, face to face with a man from another world. In a dim underground museum in central Mexico, rows of twisted, leathery figures line the walls, mummies with mouths frozen open, hair still clinging to scalps, and clothes still wrapped around their bodies. They weren't embalmed. They weren't preserved by intention. Nature did the work. And one of the most iconic among them is known simply as the Black Mummy. He earned the nickname because of his darkened, shrunken skin, so dry and tough it looks like aged leather. His pose is tense, with limbs pulled in and a look that feels almost too lifelike. The arid climate and airtight crypt in Guanajuato naturally mummified dozens of bodies, preserving them in eerie detail. The Black Mummy was discovered in the 19th century during a routine cemetery clearing. Local laws required families to pay burial fees, and if they didn't, the remains were removed. That's how workers stumbled upon the first naturally preserved bodies, and a museum grew from there. Today, this mummy is one of the museum's most famous. He doesn't speak, but his appearance says everything. Visitors are often caught between fascination and discomfort, because this isn't ancient history. It's a modern echo of death, perfectly preserved by time, soil, and silence. In the harsh heart of Iran's mountains lies the Cherabad salt mine, a place that holds something beyond minerals, frozen moments in time. Over the past few decades, miners have unearthed 6 ancient bodies buried in layers of salt, their skin hardened, their hair still flowing, and their beards curled beneath crystallized helmets. They're known as the Salt Men, and they date back over 1,100 years. One of them still had a boot on his foot, tools in his belt, and a fractured skull, evidence of a mining accident that sealed his fate. The salt preserved everything: bones, skin, hair, clothing, even a preserved stomach with trace meal still inside. The oldest of the group is believed to be from around 400 BC. He wears a gold earring and still has traces of a mustache and long hair. His expression, though frozen, is almost peaceful. Museums in Iran now hold some of these remains, displaying them not as relics, but as real people who walked into darkness and never walked out. Few preservation environments are as effective as salt. It dries, hardens, and locks out the forces of decay. These men weren't royalty or warriors, they were workers. Yet they became some of the most visually stunning mummies on Earth. Deep in the caves of Luzon Island, where the air is still and the rocks echo with ancient breath, there sits a figure unlike any other. Cross-legged, arms tucked in, teeth clenched, the fire mummy of Kabayan looks not so much buried as paused. His skin is bronze, cracked like old wood. His gaze is empty, but it feels focused. This is no accident of nature. Hundreds of years ago, a monk began a ritual that would transform him into a mummy before death. It started with a strict diet, no fats, only herbs and bark that slowly dried the body from within. Eventually, he was sealed in a stone tomb in meditation, where dehydration finished what nature started. What remains is both spiritual and scientific. The body is perfectly dried, bones stable, skin intact. No chemicals, no wrappings, just ritual, time, and willpower. These monks believed that mummification in life could lead to purity in the afterlife, and they practiced it with remarkable precision. The caves where these mummies lie are national treasures, protected and visited carefully. You won't find golden masks or pyramids. Only stone, silence, and monks who refuse to fade away. Buried beneath the sands near Alexandria, archaeologists unearthed something dazzling. A 2,000-year-old Egyptian mummy with a golden tongue placed in its mouth. The body itself was partially decayed, but the tongue, thin, gleaming, and unmistakably crafted from gold, shone brightly among the bones. The theory? Ancient priests believed that in the afterlife the soul would need to speak before the gods. A golden tongue wasn't just a symbol, it was a tool for eternal communication. The practice wasn't widespread, making this find especially rare and fascinating. The burial chamber held more than just one mummy. Nearby, others were found with gilded amulets, carved masks, and painted coffins, suggesting a necropolis for those of high status or unique religious roles. But the golden tongue remains the most striking. Egypt has no shortage of mummies, but each one teaches us something new. This one didn't just aim to preserve the body, it aimed to preserve a voice, a message, something meant to echo far beyond death. In the quiet church of San Frediano in Lucca, Italy, lies a woman who looks peacefully asleep. Saint Zita passed away in the 1200s, yet her body, displayed behind glass, shows almost no signs of decay. She became the patron saint of maids and humble workers, known for her kindness and tireless service. Unlike other mummies preserved by nature or chemicals, her body was simply found intact years after burial. No embalming, no special tomb. Visitors from around the world come to see her, drawn by the mystery of her preservation and the legacy of a life lived with quiet devotion. That's about it. Which mummy impressed you the most? Write in the comments. And don't forget to check out our other videos.